Okay, perfect. So we'll make a start with how to get a 9 to 5 in your dissertation. So my name is Lupe. I'm Vice President of Academic Experience at Kent Union, and I got 9 to 5 in my dissertation. That's pretty much the qualifications that I got to give you guys this talk. Before we start, I kind of want to introduce the Earn Your Degree Integrity campaign. So this year we're doing a lot of work to show students how you can engage with your degree, with your studies really effectively, and without the need to have to engage with academic misconduct like plagiarism or essay mills. So this year I really want to focus on giving you guys all the tools that you need to make sure that you can do this without any additional stress and without any external help, basically. So today we will cover a little background information about me. I feel like that's important so you guys get a bit of the context of my dissertation, what I'm like and all that kind of stuff. We'll go through what a dissertation is, why it's so beneficial to do one. We'll also look at basic tips that you might have heard before. Then we'll look at research ethics, the general structure of a dissertation, and something that's really important, the core, the heart to a dissertation, which is the gap in the literature. And throughout the presentation, I'll be giving you tips, and I'll also be giving examples of extracts of what I wrote in my dissertation. And finally, we'll do some really good resources that you can access if you need some extra help while you're writing. Just a few disclaimers for today. The presentation aim is to give you guys a general view of how the process of writing a dissertation goes. Please use your common sense. If it doesn't match your discipline, try to tailor it. If something I say sounds cool, you think it might sound useful, make sure that you discuss it with your supervisor beforehand, that you see that it's actually suitable for you and that you're not just utilizing a tool, utilizing something that's gonna end up being negative for you. Also, not everything I say will be useful to everyone. Just like I said, if it doesn't match your discipline, take it as general guidance. Also, not everything I say is going to be groundbreaking or something that you've heard for the first time. I'm just putting a lot of really useful points all in one place so you guys have them all really easily accessible. If you see anything in purple writing, that's examples from my dissertation or examples from my own personal experience. Please do not copy and paste what I wrote because you're going to get me in trouble as well as getting yourself in trouble. And then any personal tips, any personal things will be in red, so keep an eye out for those as well. So a little background information about me. Like I said, my name is Lupe. I'm an international student from Argentina. Hello, come in. I studied sport management in Medway. And yeah, I did a lot of business, so that's why my dissertation is really based on business practices. I love sports, I love football. In all of my assignments, I tried to tie in football, I tried to tie in marketing because that's what I was most interested in. And also I worked in a football stadium for a year and a half. So I had a lot of contact with people that were already in the industry. I had a lot of contact with fans, and that kind of triggered a lot of my ideas to my dissertation. So think about experiences that you've had that are related to your degree, things that you're already interested in, that you already have some knowledge on, and try and look at that as a potential research kind of area. So like I said, I'm from Argentina, so English is my second language. If I can do it, you guys can do it. I did the IB in secondary school, which is the International Baccalaureate, and it's kind of like the A-levels, but a bit more than A-levels. It's a pre-university baccalaureate, and I had a lot of assignment writing. So since I was like 16, I've been writing like 2,000 word essays. Like I've had a lot of experience with it, so I've had a little bit of a heads up already. I struggle a lot with procrastination. You can ask Lauren. I actually finished this presentation this morning. I work a lot better under pressure. Again, I finished this presentation this morning. So yeah, I need to be kind of scared of a deadline before I get some kind of power in my motor. And finally, I did not choose to do a dissertation. I got tricked into it. Okay, I'm an international student, and when I came to Kent, I was hearing everyone talking about, oh my God, third year dissertation, you have to do one. So I got to my third year and I was picking my modules and I was like, oh yeah, dissertation, I have to do it. So I picked it. And then like halfway through the year, I was talking to some course mates and I was like, yeah, how's your dissertation going? And they were like, yeah, I'm not doing one. And that's when it dawned on me that I actually had gotten tricked into doing one, and that other people were breezing a bit more through third year than me. So yeah, that was a bit unlucky, but it was good in the end, I promise. So we'll get on to what an actual dissertation is. The word dissertation was first used in 1651 to refer to an extended written treatment of a subject. And that's exactly what it is. It's just a very long piece on a particular subject. It's usually on original research, so that's where the gap comes in, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a little bit. And because it's such a long piece, you will have multiple drafts, you will have multiple attempts at doing it. You will have to go back and re-edit it and rearrange paragraphs, and you'll look at it 3 months from when you first started writing it and be like, this actually doesn't work anymore, let me move it. It's going to happen. It's a piece that requires a lot of constant changing and constant work, and you're never going to get it right on the first go. And that's not to demotivate you, it's actually to push you to carry on looking at it constantly and working on it. And you're expected to do more and better research than you've done before. So I don't know what the dissertation module is called for your course, but in my course, it's called individual research study. It might be called different, but it's essentially the same thing. And the dissertation is just the combination of all the skills that you've gained in your 3 years. And that's why it's such an important piece. And that's why people celebrate dissertations so much, because they're actually just a compilation of all the skills and all the information that you've gained over the years. That's going to bring you to this point. So there's different types of dissertations. You've got empirical dissertations and non-empirical dissertations. So empirical just means that you will collect your own data. And non-empirical means that you look at secondary sources and you analyze them and you work with them. This will depend on your discipline, on the assignment brief that you might have gotten. So yeah, think about that as well, whether you're going to be collecting data or if it's just going to be analyzing sources that already exist. So what are the benefits that I found? The first one is autonomy and self-direction. Because I struggle a lot with procrastination, I feel like I'm better at managing my own time and doing my own things and not being pushed by someone else. But that can also play really wrong if you actually don't do any of your work because no one is pushing you. So you have to be really on top of it. You really develop these autonomy skills and you have to push yourself to do it. The second benefit is that you get to explore a single subject really in depth and you can become an expert in it. And some people, after they do dissertations, they kind of come to that realization of, actually, I want to do a master's in this, or I want to further my studies in this. So pick your topic carefully, because it's something that you're going to be working on for really, really long. You're going to be really involved with it, and it's something that might lead you onto the future. So be smart about your choices. You can connect with your field. Like I said, sport marketing for me was like the biggest thing during my studies. And during my dissertation, I got to interview a lot of marketing experts that already work in Premier League clubs, in League One clubs. So that was really big for me. It was really cool to be able to speak to the people that are in the jobs that I want to be in the future. In terms of employability, employers really appreciate when you go into an interview or you put it in your CV that you've written a dissertation. It can really give you extra brownie points. The personal reward of writing a dissertation is actually huge as well. When I finished mine, I dedicated it to my family, who I hadn't seen in around 2 years. So it was really big for me to be able to finish my dissertation and dedicate it to my family, all the effort that I put in it. So the personal reward for it is going to be amazing at the end. Skill development, of course, critical thinking, writing, researching, all of these things that are key to employability in the future, key outcomes that you're already working on, key skills that you're already gaining. Communication, especially if you deal with human participants, if you're going to be interviewing people or supplying questionnaires and asking people questions, doing field research, you get a lot of that personal communication and public speaking, as well as just written communication skills, so really, really important. And like I said, getting a sense of direction, it might be something that in the end, you want to do in the future that you really want to get involved in. So it has a lot of things that are really good. It also has a lot of bad things like crying in the library and that kind of stuff, but that always happens. So some basic tips that you might have heard before from your supervisor, from people that have done dissertations, is that you should start early and not leave it to the last minute. Remember, it's a very long piece of work, around 10,000 words. So you definitely don't want to leave it to the last minute. You should pick something that you're personally interested in, again, because it's so long, you want to actually like the topic and not just choose something for the sake of it. You have to make it unique and interesting with your titles, with the themes that you explore, as well as with your writing style. You can also be really unique in how you communicate the findings, how you do your research, and all of those things. Look at your assignment brief before you plan anything. I was very lucky. My dissertation supervisor gave us a very detailed brief to write our dissertation. So he broke it down section by section, telling us what he was expecting from us, how many words we should have in each section, more or less. It was a really, really good guide. I would recommend you speak to your supervisor if you haven't done so already, and ask them if there's an assignment brief or if there's any specifications of what they want to see in your particular field dissertation. Don't forget to cite appropriately. This goes for any assignment that you might do at university. Is one of the key things when it comes to academic writing. Don't forget to use Google Scholar, which is something that a lot of people don't use, but it's a really great tool to find keywords and kind of match up the research papers to your research topic. You also need to know exactly what you want to say, and you need to explain it as if the reader doesn't know anything about your topic. And that's the main thing. You have to explain it from scratch. And finally, leave plenty of time before you submit it to make sure that you can go back, polish it, change paragraphs around, see how it looks better. If you need to change any chapters, if you need to move things around, make sure that you have enough time to do that so that you don't submit something that you're not entirely happy with. So these are some things that you might have heard before or might not, but they're always useful to go through. So we'll move on to what research ethics are. And this is a very important part of writing a dissertation. Research ethics, when you stick to them, it basically means that your dissertation is valid. If you do not fill out the forms that are in the bullet points, you are not allowed to do your dissertation. These are things that you need to complete before you start collecting your data in particular. You can start writing your academic literature review, but you can't collect your data until you have looked at all the ethical considerations that you need to look at, especially if you're working with human participants. So some of these are the full ethics application, and then you need to add your research proposal. It needs to get approved by your supervisor. They'll ask you questions about, are you using any incentives? Are you working with children? And these are all kind of tick box things that the university needs to look at to make sure that you're being fully compliant with the guidance and with the laws that are in place when it comes to researching ethically. There's also participant information sheets, which are really important. Again, if you are actually using human participants like I was, you will have to give them kind of a brief of what your dissertation is, why you need them there, why their opinion is so valuable, and explain to them that you will ask them to sign consent sheets and that you will keep all their information safe. What steps are you taking to keep their information safe, etc. You might also have to do an interview schedule. If you're doing interviews, and that basically means that you're writing down all the questions that you want to ask, and they also need to get approved. And there's also a student supervisor agreement sheet where both of you and your supervisor sign to make sure that you're compliant with everything, basically. But these are really important things that you need to finish before you start collecting your data. And you have to add a lot of information that we'll talk about in a little bit about your methodology and what research kind of avenues you're going to be taking. So now moving on to the actual structure of a dissertation. Like it says there, typically it'll be more or less 10,000 words. I was way over my word limit, but my lecturer allowed it, so it's all right. You have an abstract that's not part of the word count. You have your introduction, your review of the literature or literature review. You have your methodology. You have your results and your discussion. In my particular field, they are put together. So I analyze my findings. I don't present the findings and then discuss them. Your discipline might be different, but it's definitely worth having a chat with your supervisor if there's any way that you can combine both of them, because it was really easy to write it that way as opposed to having the results and then writing it. So I'd recommend that you ask if that's possible for you. And then finally, conclusions and recommendations for future researchers. You have your references and your appendices at the end. It looks crazy, I know, but it's kind of what a year looks like if you're doing your dissertation and you started right at the start. I know that the presentation comes on a slightly late part of the year, and me saying, yeah, you should have your literature review complete in February or late January is kind of, but this is typically what it would look like. So ideally you would want to have your research ethics all completed by mid-November, so in the first month and a half of the term. Before winter break, you ideally want to have your literature review complete. So that's about 3,500 words of your literature, of your dissertation already done before winter break. And this makes it easier so that then you can focus on the other side of the research, which is your methodology, how you're going to complete the research, that you write it around the winter break. And then it gives you a really good window between early January and February to approach people, try to get participants, speak to them, and try to get them on board to take part in your research. Then in February, I collected, sorted, and analyzed my data. And then I used around a month and a half for my results and my discussion and the conclusion and all that kind of stuff. And then finally, I left around a week and a half, more or less, to do my references, to proofread, to make sure that I could move things around if I needed to, and finally submit it. So I know it looks kind of crazy, but when you go through it step by step, you see how all the little pieces fall into place, and they all kind of work to complete the dissertation in a timely way and in an organized way. This leads me to my first tip, which is building a working relationship with your supervisor. I can't stress how important this is. Make sure that you attend the teaching for the first few weeks, because you'll find that then after a few weeks, they all disappear. You don't have lectures and seminars for your dissertation module anymore. You're left by yourself to do your work and to take that accountability to go up to your lecturer and ask them to help you, and ask them if what you're doing is right, if you're on track, if you're on time, and all those kinds of things. When you meet your dissertation supervisor, be really honest. My dissertation supervisor has seen me cry many times on him on Teams, which was kind of funny when I thought about it after, because I was like, it was actually not that hard. Why were you crying to this man? But, you know, if they have set up a particular structure or plan, understand it and stick to it. This is what I'm saying about the assignment brief that I got. It was really clear, so I really stuck to it, and it yielded really good results. Be really mindful of the time that you contact academics. You're more likely to get a great response if you do it during work hours than late at night, because even if they won't answer, you know how sometimes you get an email from university at like 8 p.m. and you're like, why are you emailing me? Academics feel the same sometimes when students email them really late. So it's good to stay on the right side of the bed with them, and yeah, just be mindful of when you contact them and when you choose to speak to them about your dissertation. This is a really big tip. And it's that any academic can act as your supervisor. I've spoken to some students that tell me, you know, oh, my supervisor is like not that great, like he doesn't really speak to me, or they don't really follow up with me, they don't give me the best answers. But the truth is, any academic that you feel comfortable with, that you already have a good relationship with, can be your supervisor, and you can ask them to proofread your stuff and ask them to have a meeting and discuss the direction that your dissertation is going towards. And for them to give you their professional opinion is really, really valuable. So take advantage of any academic that you get along with, and utilize their expertise to help you build your dissertation. And be proactive. Like I said, go and chase them for meetings, send them emails, ask to have a discussion about where your dissertation is going relatively regularly. I know we're all really busy, and I definitely didn't speak to my supervisor every month, but I tried to have a kind of regular schedule and talk to them as much as I could. And yeah, understand that you're one of many people in your course. So you really want to stand out and take that step to ask all the questions, because they're not going to chase after every single student, but you can chase after them. So what we'll look at now is each part of the dissertation structure. So we'll start with the abstract, which is the first bit that you see if you've looked at research papers before. You will see that there is like a little paragraph at the start that explains what the research entails, what the main findings are, and all those kinds of things. It's usually around 200 to 300 words. You do it at the end because you need to have had your findings in order to write what you found. It doesn't count in the word count, but it gets marked in the overall presentation of your dissertation. So even though it doesn't specifically get any marks directly to it, when you think of dissertation presentation and the structure and how well the writing flows, this goes into it. So it's a part of it as well. And also it's really useful when you're looking at other research papers to look at the abstract first to kind of see if it's going to be useful to you or not. And the abstract contains 4 main things: the purpose, the methodology, the key findings, and the implications. So you want to really briefly describe why your research is an important issue, how you carried out the research, if it was with interviews, if it was with questionnaires, if it was from a database, whatever it is, the answers that you found and what the answers mean. So what does it mean for the industry? What does your finding change in the way that people see your field or your area of research? And these are some, These are some examples of stuff that I wrote in my dissertation. So you see the first bit that's highlighted is the purpose of it. So the study focuses on exploring how marketing professionals in the UK utilize social media, and I specified a bit more what it meant. And then I talked about why it was important. So it's important because social media is becoming a bigger thing in everyone's lives at the moment, and especially for sports. I also talked about what makes my research unique. So I'm doing it from a manager's point of view, and how I collected the data, my methodology, which was through a literature review and through interviews, which were qualitative data collection. And at the bottom, you'll see my 3 research questions answered. So the first one, it doesn't really matter what my questions were, but basically those are the things that I specified in my abstract, because they were the main questions that I had. Then we're moving on to the introduction of your dissertation. Again, this is also usually done at the end. It's around 1,000 words. You can do 750. You can kind of bargain with how much you do in each section, but it's around 1,000 words. You can start it whenever you want, but it's useful to do it at the end, I think, because you have a better view of what you've written already, and you're a lot better to introduce a topic that you've already spoke about. Then I think it's an important part to really focus on, because it sets the tone for the dissertation. It kind of already gives an indication of where you want to go with your study and why you're so particularly interested in this area and this research question. The 3 key elements of an introduction is discussing what the research is, what the main area of the research is, why it's important, and this is key. It shouldn't be your opinion. You're not telling them why you think it's important. You're telling them why academics in the field say that this is a very important area to work on. And then you also explain what you're doing to address the issue. So you will talk about your research questions. I didn't do it here. I did it in a different section, but it doesn't really matter. You talk about the aims, the objectives, and the strategy that you used to carry out your research. In here, we have kind of some examples that I've highlighted of those main points that it should include. So I'm talking about the main kind of area that I worked on, which was relationship marketing. I explained it, and see how now I have started adding my references. I didn't do that in the abstract. You start in the introduction, and I'm using them to explain why relationship marketing is so big, why it's so important for sports. why social media in particular is really important for relationship marketing and for sports. So I'm making sure that I'm hitting all those kind of key things and key elements that my introduction has to have. And yeah, it's kind of boring to look at a big screen full of words, but you know, I was just giving you guys some time. And then see how I didn't write in that paragraph, I didn't write my aims, my objectives, and my strategy, because I did it differently. So I made a separate chapter for it. This is something that I got as an idea from another dissertation that I wrote. So my lecturer provided us with 3 different dissertations to kind of use as examples and to look at and to get an idea of it. And this is something that a different student had done. And I thought, wow, that's really cool, because I'm always over the word limit. And if I put it this way, it's a lot easier to kind of say it in a condensed way and not have to write full paragraphs explaining everything. And yeah, is there anything else? Oh, okay. So again, this is one of those things that if you want to do it, make sure that you speak to your lecturer about it and make sure that it's okay for you to do it. That's what I did. I asked him, do you think it's a good idea? He said, yes, go with it. So I did it. But please make sure that it's right for you and your discipline and your piece of work. Then moving on to the literature review, which was the stage of my dissertation where I started to question myself and question why I was doing this whole thing in the start, because it was very hard, it was very challenging, and I guess the one thing that I would say for you to think of it in a lot less challenging way, I guess, is that you should treat your literature review as its own essay, as if it was its own little thing, unrelated to the rest of your dissertation, so that you can really focus on this as its own piece of work. It's between 3,000 and 3,500 words. It forms the basis of your research. So you use it to highlight the research gaps and to support the new insights that you aim to provide with your dissertation. So like I said before, a dissertation is supposed to be based on original work. You're supposed to be researching something that's new, or researching it in a new way, or researching it in a new area, in a new geographical kind of area. You have to do something different. And this is why it's so important to look at the literature that's already available, so that then you can say, okay, they didn't look at it in this lens, or they didn't look at it in this country, or they didn't look at it with this type of participants. And that's the key heart to a dissertation, is finding the gap and making sure that you are filling a piece of the literature, a piece of the research that's actually going to bring a lot of value to the field, that's going to bring a lot of value to your industry, and that's the main point. So you have to show off the depth and breadth of the sources you have read. You have to show off that you have done so much research, you've read all the papers, you understood all the key themes in your industry, in your field. And you have to summarize important sources, the main research papers that you find for this part, but you have to critically engage with them. So you have to criticize it, you have to contrast and make sure that you show off when there is a contrast between what an author says and what another author says, to make sure that you are showing off to the reader, actually, I understand that these people are saying different things about the same thing. Let me find out more about this. And that's how you can follow all the little avenues to reach your research question and kind of that gap that you want to find. It's a critical analysis of the research arguments in your field. You are not supposed to be making any new contributions at this stage of your dissertation. You are just looking at what's already there and trying to critically engage with it and understand why different people are coming at it from different points of view. The purpose of a literature review is to show the reader that you have a really good understanding of what's going on in your field. It's also important to persuade the reader and the marker, most importantly, the person that's going to give you a grade, that what you have researched is actually relevant, that other authors that are published in this field, that have experience in the field, are saying, yes, this is a very relevant topic. This is a really important thing to research. You also use this part of the dissertation to highlight there is a gap. There is something that we need to find out that other people have not found out yet. It also informs your methodology. So when you look at your literature review, you will see, okay, this author looked at the topic in a qualitative way. He did interviews, but this author did it with numbers, and he looked at figures and did statistical analysis of the same topic. And these are the things that you will also use to say, I'm going to use this way of investigating the research topic because I see it more fit because of this, this, and this reason. And you get that understanding once you have read a lot of papers and you have looked at the different ways that people investigate a topic. And finally, it gives context to your findings and the relevance of them. It's very, very important that you make links between your literature review and what you have found after your data collection. That's where you show off. I understand the literature and I understand how my findings have implications on the industry that I'm researching. Like I said, it can be confusing and overwhelming. Let me repeat myself. I cried a lot during my literature review process, and it's really, really time consuming. I cannot tell you how many full days I did at the library from like 10 a.m. to 8. Okay, I procrastinated. I could have done it a lot quicker, but it takes a lot of time. Don't underestimate how much effort this takes. So the steps for writing the literature review, and I know I'm putting a lot of emphasis on this part, but it's because it's such an essential part of the dissertation that I really want to give you like all the information that I can to make sure that you carry out your literature review in a way that's really useful to you. So the steps to do the literature review include identifying sources, reading and rereading, thinking about the gap, and writing a review with all the preparation that you have made. So first, identifying your sources. You want to look at a reference list if you've been given one by your tutor or your supervisor to kind of see the general areas that they are looking for you to investigate. And it might give you a good idea for a particular field that you want to look at. First, initially, you want to find around 5 to 10 sources that explore your research from different perspectives. Like I said, it could be in different countries, it could be looking at different participants, it could be using different research methods and data collection methods, etc. If you struggle to find multiple sources about a particular topic, that's not a bad sign. It's actually a great sign. It tells you that that area has not been studied enough. And that's a great point to make in your dissertation. I could barely find things about this very specific thing. Let me research this. But some good things that you could do is look at the related articles that sometimes pop up on the side of a publisher's website. Look at the reference list of the papers that you have read. If you find a really cool model in a paper, make sure you follow that reference and go to the original paper that this was referenced from and read that paper, because that's like the basis of what this really interesting paper said. Your sources should be balanced, so make sure that you use books and academic journals and other published work from respectable scholars. Try not to use many websites because, again, remember, a dissertation is bigger, better, more focused research than any other piece of work that you have done before. So you really need to make sure that you're using really trustworthy sources, that they are reputable, as current as possible, accurate, and yeah, just really trustworthy, most importantly. So some questions that you might want to ask yourself when you selecting your sources is, what do I want to find out? What theoretical issues do I want to tackle? What sort of methodology would I like to apply? Will I do qualitative research, quantitative research, a mixture of both? And most importantly, you need to keep a list of all your sources. So what I did, I just had a random Word document where I pasted all my links. And that way, when it came to referencing at the end, I would just open the document, cite this for me, and just copy paste all the links and get my references really quick. But nothing is scarier than making a really interesting point and then not being able to find the source that you got it from. So make sure that you keep an accurate list of all your sources. Which brings me to my second tip when it comes to finding articles. Control F is the best thing that has happened to me since I started university. You can just do Control F and a little pop-up search bar will show on your screen, and you can type up any keywords that you're really interested in. And then it will highlight every single time it's mentioned. And this is really great because you can maximize your time. If you're looking for a very specific model, a very specific topic, and you search it up and it doesn't show up in the paper at all, that's great. It only took you 2 seconds instead of reading through the whole thing and trying to see if it was related or not. It's really, really helpful. And I will talk a bit more about what a dump document is in a little bit, which sounds a little bit sketchy, but it's really useful because in my dump document, I would basically just keep records of all the main points that I had read about. And then I would just, when I was talking about, for example, trust, which was an element of my dissertation, I would just type up trust and I would see every single time trust was mentioned in any paper that I had read. And that's really useful. So yeah, make sure that you use this tool for anything. You can also use it inside websites, within Word documents as well. So it's really good to keep a hold and remember this tool whenever you can use it. The second step in writing a literature review is reading and rereading. You want to read in stages. It's really overwhelming to do a literature review because you're looking at so many papers that all kind of talk about similar things but are really different, and they all make really, really different points. So you want to make sure that you read in stages so that you don't get overwhelmed by it. So first you should kind of read all the main sources. You know, you checked with Control F to see if it was relevant to you. It had some themes that are important to you, so read it once so that you can, you know, discard any papers that actually don't work for you. And then in a second point, you read again, but more critically. So this is a point where you take your notes, paste important paragraphs into your dump document, which is coming soon, I promise, and think about the methodologic approach, the hypothesis or main argument of each paper. Okay, and really importantly, you need to think of what your academic opinion of them is. So if an author used a certain way to research something, so they used a qualitative method, and you don't think it's most appropriate, make sure that you keep a note of that so that then you can actually talk about it and critically engage with the literature that you have read and say why that wasn't the best approach, for example. So by this stage in your literature review process, you should start to see the main themes. You will start to see what kind of topics keep coming up over and over again in your industry. And there will be arguments and counter arguments within each of these themes. So some authors will say one thing and all other authors will say different things. It's important to keep track of these things. And it's also a great time to start thinking of how you can organize subchapters in your literature review. So will you organize them by theme? Will you organize them by arguments? So who's in favor will be the first side of your literature review, who's against will be the second side of your literature review. By methodology, so do you want to do everyone that did interviews first and then everyone who did questionnaires then, etc., etc. Do you want to do it chronologically? This is particularly useful in like arts and history. It's used a lot this way. So you organize the papers by which one was published first, second, third, etc. And it all depends on what you want to achieve. So, for example, if you were doing it chronologically, you very clearly want to show how a topic has advanced through time, all the progress that has been made inside that topic. If you do it by theme, it's because you believe that there are, you know, really core, I guess, like main ideas that you want to stick off, regardless of when it was written. By argument, if you want to show that something is a topic that's really debated about a lot, that the people don't really seem to find a middle point on, it's a great way to show in your literature review that actually there's a lot of conflict within literature in this particular issue, or this particular debate. So it all depends on what you are trying to achieve with your literature review. And here we are. This is a dump document. So I have done this since my first year. I basically had a Word document where I would keep track of all my links to all my research papers. And this is kind of what it looked like. So I would always put the link and then I would put the in-text reference on it. So I would look at this and then I would, you know, I would know exactly how to reference it right there, right then. And you can add more sources as you read, and this is where Control F plays into it. So, you know, I already knew that in all these papers, certain themes were repeated and they were talked about in different ways. So I could just find consumer attitudes and see how different authors talked about that. And it was really easy to kind of see it all at once. And to use my critical thinking, it made it really, really clear. So I would highly recommend that you guys treat your papers in this way. It's also a great way to have all your notes in one place or your own ideas in one place as well. The third step is thinking about the gap. So a dissertation is based on original research, and this is where the gap comes into place. It refers to a gap in the literature. They are missing pieces of information in the literature. They are areas that have a lot of scope for you to broaden the knowledge that there is already on it. They could be unexplored, underexplored, or just not studied at all. Also, they might have been studied in the past, but it's really outdated and no one has really studied it recently. So the ultimate goal of a dissertation is to contribute something new to the literature. And yeah, like I said before, the gaps could be because of sample or population, so the size, the type of population, the geographical location. It could be because of the research method, the data collection, or different research variables and conditions. And this is applicable to any discipline as well. How do you find the gap? So first, you think of a topic that you're interested in. There's some keywords that you can think of to make sure that you stick to that topic. You can use research engines, so Google Scholar, library search that's offered by the university, PubMed, which is like a bunch of research papers, is like a publisher. And then what you do is you collate a wide pool of research papers. You can do this in your dump document, and think about how they are different. Do they all use the same data collection methods? Are they all using samples from the same country? Are they all looking at it from a qualitative end or from a quantitative end, etc.? And then decide how you will use all this information to define your research question and your methodology and make your research your own. Some keywords to look out for when you're trying to find the gap. You can use Control F for this, and you can search up these phrases. And if these phrases show up in a study, then you know that you have a gap there. You know that there is room for you to explore more things. Just make sure that you use this as guidance to inform your literature searches, because some papers might be outdated. So they might be written in, I don't know, 1995 and say, yeah, there's been no research done in this area, but there's been, you know, around 27 years in between then and now. There might have been some further research done. So you want to still look out for it. It's a good indicator, but don't take it with a grain of salt, basically. Don't trust just because a paper says it that there's been no research done on it. So in my case, these are the steps that I followed to find my gap. So I knew I wanted to do something related to fans, social media, and sports, particularly football clubs. But sports was like a more broad area for me to find more literature. I use mostly Google Scholar, and I combined I made different combinations of my keywords. And the more I read, the more I was able to identify models and theories and use these to search for more information on them. I had my separate dump document where I pasted all my links, and it was a great way to keep all the papers I wanted to include just in one place. And I found that some of my papers focused on social media platforms. Others analyzed a specific platform but focused on different sports. So there was a few research papers that all looked at Twitter. Some of them looked at it from a an American football team or a basketball team. Others looked at the same sport but in different countries. And there was a bunch of papers on UK football clubs, but they had all been done 10 to 15 years ago. So they were all really, really outdated. And from all this information that I found, particularly from point 4, I decided to focus on social media for football clubs in the UK and collected my data from qualitative data with interviews. And that basically just informed the general guidance and the general route that I was going to take with my dissertation. I know that has been a lot so far, so we're going to do a little break, just so you guys can take a little breather, and me as well. And yeah, we'll be back in a tiny bit. Did it unmute? Yeah. Okay, hello everyone, we're back. There was a question in the chat about tips for writing proposals. And I would say the best thing that you can do is look at papers that already exist, make sure that you've already been doing your reading and that you have a good idea of the different research methods that already exist in your area, and kind of put them together and given reasons as to why you would choose a certain method over another method, why you would choose a particular topic. So you need to show in your proposal, you need to show how your topic is relevant in the field. So what other authors are saying about the topic, how many other people are researching it, how much impact does it have on the industry. So you should talk about all those things. And then put a lot of information about how you're actually planning to carry out the research. And actually your proposal will go alongside your ethical forms. So you can use both of them to kind of like inform each other to make sure that you're sticking to all the ethical principles, and showing that in your proposal that you actually take in consideration of any issues that might pop up. Or any problems that might exist with your research, if you're dealing with a vulnerable population, if you're dealing with children, or whatever it is, to make sure that you are including all of that in your proposal. Make sure that you show you are covering your bases, and that's how your research proposal should hopefully be approved. You need to really show that you've considered it from every angle, and that you are going to be given a green light to take part in the research. But yeah, those are a few things that you should definitely include in your proposal, and look at examples of proposals. I can try and find some resources as well online that give a more clear guide. So if you'd like me to help you find some resources, just drop me an email or a Teams chat message, and I'll try and help you out. But yeah, I hope the break was all right, and then it gave your brains that little kind of for a second. I definitely needed it. And we'll carry on with the last step of writing the literature review, which is actually writing it. And this is often the hardest part, and it's often the most tedious part. But you should definitely look at other dissertations in your field. Familiarize yourself with the key debates, themes, methodology, research avenues, etc. I would say keep it simple. There's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of different research papers in your area, and you can't physically include every single one of them in your review. Make sure that you hit in the key ones, though. Make sure that you are getting the most important ones, the most relevant ones, the ones that have the bigger impact on your field. You are definitely not expected to discuss every single perspective in your area. Don't think that you need to do that, because that might make it even more overwhelming and be kind of detrimental to your writing process. Paraphrase as much as you can. This is how you show that you actually understand the topic, when you can explain it in your own words. And limit your use of direct quotations as well, to make sure that you're showing them, I understood what this person said. I'm not just regurgitating what they have said. I'm not just repeating them. And also it shows that you can engage critically with the literature, so that you can, make comments where you need to, challenge a certain type of perspective if you need to. And also it's really important when you start writing that you decide how you want to organize your chapters and sub-chapters. So like I talked before, if you're going to do it chronologically, make sure that you keep it by decade or by era. And that you name your sub-chapters in a way that is going to make it really clear to the reader how your literature review is divided. And treat each sub-chapter like its own little essay. So have a little introduction, a short one, it doesn't have to be really long, a main body and a short conclusion summarizing it. And this is what I did for my one. So I'll show you how I divided my themes. So my literature review had 4 chapters in it. I had relationship marketing, which was like the umbrella topic, relationship marketing in sport, relationship quality, which is a model within relationship marketing in sport, and then finally social media and relationship marketing in sport organizations. So you can see how I went from the big theme to the medium theme to the small theme to the extra small theme. And that's how I really focused my dissertation and kind of put it through a funnel. And this way, it also led me directly into my research questions as I went through each topic and I explored every single one of them. It made it really easy to, finalize my literature review with, given this, this, and this, these are the questions that I want to look at. Some writing tips are using academic style writing, of course. Try to limit how much you use the first person, use the third person as much as you can. Be concise and coherent. Don't waffle for the sake of waffling. When you're writing your dissertation, you're going to feel like you might repeat certain things over and over again. But remember, it's a very long piece of writing. So if you only mention a thing once and then you bring it up out of nowhere, people are going to be like, what? But if you are, repeating yourself and making key points over and over again, when you need to, don't abuse this point. Make sure that you're only using the themes and mentioning the themes when it's appropriate to do so. But make sure that there's a cohesion to your whole dissertation. And forget the word says. Don't use that word in your dissertation. Use other things like claims, states, defines, argues. These are more academic key words, basically. Oh my God, I thought I was muted on the call. I was like, no. But yeah, here you can see how and also group sources according to arguments. This is really useful because it shows your lecturer, the person that's grading, actually this student was able to identify that this, and that author all said the same thing in different papers. So make sure that you group your sources. If a few authors are saying the same thing, show that they do and show that you actually have read something and are really well informed on which people have said what things. So here's a clear example of how I said define instead of other research say the concept of. That sounds a lot worse than define. And this is some examples of what I wrote in my literature review. So these authors highlight that relationship marketing has issues in practice. And just a little bit of context. Right before this, I had written about how relationship marketing is seen as the best way to build relationships and it's so amazing. And I was saying really, really positive things about relationship marketing. But I needed to find the counter arguments. I needed to show that I'm critically discussing the topic. So I said, actually, it's great, but these authors say that there's issues with it in certain industries. It doesn't work for everyone. And that's the kinds of things that you need to show. When someone disagrees, make sure that you show that there's people disagreeing with the topic. And that's how you show that you critically engaged with your literature review and with the articles that you have read. And yeah, you can see here as well, they've been widely researched. This is kind of the point that I made about finding the gap and showing that there is a gap. So, for example, the theoretical benefits have been widely researched, but further research is required on sport practitioners' views, understanding and implementation, which is something that Abessa and that article said. In that article, they mentioned how, yeah, there's been a lot of research, but we haven't researched it from this particular view. And that's how you show that there is a gap. And that's why I wrote in my dissertation, I'm going to be asking marketing experts because they haven't been asked enough. And that's the justification for my methodology. And then finally, again, this is another example of how I showed that there was a gap. Magnuson et al. Claim that there is a relatively low number of sport-focused studies that focus on certain underlying concepts like reciprocity, which reciprocity is part of a model that I was studying when I was writing my dissertation. So this is how I highlighted, no one has studied this particular thing. Let's look at it. Okay, and these are the things that you need to be including throughout your presentation, throughout your literature review. My tip number 4 is making a literature table if you are able to and you're allowed to by your lecturer. So this is an idea that I got from a great research paper that I read, where they did kind of like a meta-analysis of a bunch of different sports marketing related papers. And I thought, that looks really good. It looks like a very clear way to organize your sources and your main research papers that you'll be using. Please ask your supervisor first if you're allowed to include a table like this. Some may not let you. My lecturer said it was okay, so I did it. And basically in my dump document, I had taken notes of all my papers, and I had read all the abstracts, so I could identify specific information from all of them and put them in a table to look at it and compare them a lot better. So this study had this purpose, and they looked at it in, manager interviews, but this paper did it with marketing staff online surveys. So they looked at it from different points of view with different methodologies. The perspective, the sport context is different. One of them did it in a bunch of American major leagues, and then the other one was done for American college sports. So that's the difference between the two papers. And I basically did this exact same thing with must have been something like 15 different articles that I put in my table. And then it was really easy for me to carry on my literature review and say, this, and this paper were all researched in America. This, and this paper looked at it from a qualitative perspective. This, and this paper found these things, etc. So it's a really useful thing to add, and it really shows the reader that you understood the literature, that you have a really good understanding of what each paper has said. So I would highly recommend that if you're allowed to in your literature review, that you include something like this, because it's really great if you don't like writing paragraphs that much. So this could replace some of your word count as well. And it's just great analysis, and it's a great mental exercise as well to familiarize yourself with the papers that you're writing about. Then we have tip number 5. That was actually me doing my literature review, I won't lie. Allow enough time so that you can afford to not look at your dissertation, at your literature review, for a month or 2 after you write it. And that's exactly what I did. So if you remember the timeline of writing your dissertation, I finished mine start of December, so way before the winter break. And I didn't look at it again until February, like sometime in February. I literally just did not read it. I refused to look at it. I had a lot of other things to focus on. And because I did it so early, I could afford to not look at it. This is really overwhelming, so I want to allow yourself to go back and look at it in the future. When you are constantly with your head inside your literature review, and it's such an overwhelming process, and you're mentally tired, and it's long and everything, we stop being able to look at it objectively and to see it for what it is. I remember when I read my literature review again in February, I was like, wow, who wrote this? Because I actually couldn't believe that it had been me that wrote it, but it was. So I was pleasantly surprised. I would really recommend you do that, because it kind of boosts your confidence as well. When you see something that's really high quality that you have written, you're like, okay, I can actually do this. And like I say, it was a great time to focus on other assignments, other responsibilities that you might have. It kind of makes a dissertation not ruin your entire year, basically. So I would really recommend that you have the opportunity to have some fresh eyes before you look at your literature review again, and before you continue with the rest of your dissertation. So right after the literature review, you usually have the methodology, which is about 1,000 to 1,500 words. And in this one, you have to explain precisely, exactly, clearly, and in very thorough detail what the research design is and what the steps are in your data collection. I would highly recommend that you look at research books. So there might be research methods for sciences, for STEM. Look at those types of books, because they will give you examples of what best methodology will suit your dissertation. And it's also a great way to reference and to support your decisions of why I have chosen to do this particular way of data collection. Because this author said it would be great for this particular area, or it would be great for this particular topic. It should be clear to the reader that your methodology is thoughtful and tailored to accurately answer the questions that you aim to answer. Okay, it has to be tailored to your particular research questions. And recognize that it won't be perfect, because methodology never is. Be honest and explicit about the limitations. I didn't write my limitations in this part of my dissertation. I wrote it in my conclusion, just because I thought it would go well with my recommendations that I'm making. But you can also include it in the methodology. Again, this is a conversation to have with your supervisor. Ask them, should I put my limitations in this chapter or should I do it in the conclusion? Where do you think it'd suit best? And then these are the 5 elements that you definitely want to have in your methodology. So the research design, so will it be a case study? Will it be an interpretative research? Will it be qualitative? All of that kind of stuff. Why and how does it help answer your question? What are the precise methods that you'll be using? So I'll be using interviews, I'll be using secondary data, I'll be doing document analysis, etc. Then you talk about how you will analyze your data, and what are the ethical considerations that you have taken. And again, this is really important to show that there's been a lot of thought put into your methodology, that you're not just doing it randomly, that you actually understand why this is the best way to do it, and also what is the best way to go about it while following all the guidelines and all the rules, etc. So here, these are kind of some examples of how I justified my methodology. So I use some authors that say that sport is a social phenomenon. And then I talked a bit about qualitative data, which is a type of research that is usually done in social settings. And yeah, that was a good way to. Was that me? Hello? Okay, good. But yeah, and also it says, I was talking about how, sorry, I was talking about how I was going to be asking experts about it and how I really want to gather expertise. And of course, you can't gather expertise with numbers. You have to do it through words, through explanations, through a conversation. And that's also how I justified it. Then I talked about the interpretivist approach to research, which is about getting information and interpreting it into bigger themes. And we are looking to interpret the meanings, understandings, and actions of actors. So I really wanted to understand why marketing managers did a certain thing, or why a club would not DM a fan, for example. Why don't clubs DM fans if fans would love that to happen? So those are the kind of things that I was trying to find out. And I used a lot of research books and different academic textbooks that already explained how research is conducted, how methodology is conducted, to inform and justify my choices. And that's a really key point for you to have a think about. How can I justify the way that I'll be carrying out my research? That's the main part of a methodology. And this one, again, I explained, I'll be using a semi-structured interview method to define relevant areas. It allows subjects to become informants, providing data from their own perspective. So I didn't want to have close-ended questions because I wanted them to tell me. I knew nothing about it. I wanted them to be able to explore the topic in their own way. I showed how I use purposive sampling because for me, it was really important that my participants were marketing experts in football clubs. So I couldn't just go and ask a random person. I had to go and find these particular people. And that's called purposive sampling. So that's something that I found out from a research methodology book. I found out that there's these different types of sampling, which one is the best for me, justify it, add your reference, that's it. And then again, I only did 4 interviews. So I talked about how, before I wrote this paragraph, I talked about how for qualitative data, the sample size is not so important. I'm looking at the experiences and not necessarily I don't care that is a generalized concept. I just care about the particular experiences that these particular people have had. So I talked about how sample size wasn't that big of a deal for me. Because I was using data saturation, which again is a concept that I learned from a research methodology book. This didn't just come out of my brain. I went and found the references to justify what I was trying to do. So yeah, I used data saturation instead of an extensive sample size, etc. So these are the kind of things that you should be mentioning throughout your methodology to make sure that you're really showing to the reader, I understand the perfect way to carry out this research, and this is why this is the perfect approach to it. This is why I'm doing interviews, this is why I'm doing a questionnaire, etc. Whatever it is, just make sure that you justify it and that you show that you understand the topic well enough to design your research to fit your questions. And then comes the point of collecting your data, which for me was the most fun part of the whole dissertation. I loved it. It will look very different to every single person. So if you're doing secondary data, it's going to look very different to you. If you are collecting data in a lab, of course, it's going to look very different to you. So I would say that you need to find enough time so that you can find, contact and brief your participants, if you have any human participants in your research, which is a very long and frustrating process. At times, I would say ask your division for help. When I was a student, and I'm sure you guys must have gotten it as well, but I got a bunch of emails from my division saying, hey, this third year student is doing a dissertation. Would you like to be a participant in this study? So you can ask your division to send out recruitment emails to ask other students to participate as well. You can also ask societies as well. If you're really interested in a particular topic and you want to speak to a particular group of people, you can ask a society to share the opportunity with the members or with other students that are also interested in that topic. Make sure that you keep accurate records and that you respect GDPR, which is part of your ethical consideration. So you really need to stick to that kind of stuff. And yeah, I would highly recommend doing interviews if it's something that you can do and it fits your discipline, just because I found it really fun and really interesting to speak with people in my industry. But how I did it was, like I said, I was going to be interviewing marketing managers in football clubs in the UK. So what I did was I went on LinkedIn and I started sending invitations to absolutely everyone, sending everyone a message. I must have sent around like 200 different invitations and messages and everything. And only 4 people accepted to do the research for me. So it is frustrating when you get so many no's and you get so many people that are not interested, but you will find people that are interested in taking part. So don't lose hope. Just make sure that you allow yourself enough time to be able to find these people that actually want to take part. And then I did my interview. So I sent them the participant information sheet with all the specs about my dissertation, where I explained, this is why I'm doing it. This is why you are the perfect person, because you have the information. I would really value your opinion. I was kind of like buttering them up, to get them to speak to me. I explained to them how I was going to be sticking to GDPR. So I told them, your data will be all anonymized once I transcribed it. I'm only going to keep it for 60 days after, so you don't have to worry, it will be deleted. So I just, send them all the information for it. And then they accepted. I sent them consent forms. They signed it. I sent it back to my lecturer so that he could give me the okay. And then I did my interviews. I transcribed all the, the audio from the interviews. And then I just started highlighting really important themes. So when I was looking at my data, I was keeping all the key themes that I wrote about in my literature review, to make sure that I was connecting what I talked about in my interviews to the main points. And that made it really, really easy for me to then go and discuss my findings, because I could easily relate them to the literature review. And yeah, it was really cool. Like I said, I really, really enjoyed it. And it's great if you want to connect with people in your industry or other people that are interested in the industry as well. I would highly, highly recommend interviews. And then you get to your results and your discussion. Again, this is about 3,000 to 3,500 words. In sport business, these categories tend to be combined, but if they're not, you will often see results being around 1,000 words and discussion around 2.5K. I won't lie, when it comes to quantitative data, the results look crazy. If you ever looked at a paper that shows quantitative data, it's like standard deviation and the median and this and that. You're like, what does all of that mean? Like, basically, the results chapter just never makes sense to me. I just go directly to the discussion because my brain can't process it. So I really feel for you doing a science dissertation, really. Now I'll be fine. So yeah, particularly in the discussion, you want to organize your findings and the implications of your findings into chapters, and have some creative titles for them. It makes it a lot more interesting. It makes the reader want to read them. The chapters should be based on key themes, ideas, debates, and research questions that underpin the topic. particularly did it based on my research questions, just because I had 3 of them. So I did the first chapter for 1, second and third, and then there was sub-chapters within them. You can use key themes that emerge from your data to shape up your chapters, or you can use your literature review as a way to kind of have the puzzle and then just put your data into the themes that you got from your literature review, as opposed to doing it the other way around. You could do a mixture of both as well. And the most important thing is that you are constantly making links between what you found and the themes in the literature review. So whether they are saying the same, where whether your findings match the literature review and what that says, or whether it's different, you want to highlight this to show that you critically understand the subject and you are able to say it matches or it doesn't match. But you need to constantly be making those links. In your discussion, you will be using references, you will be referencing sources and papers, not as much as in your literature review, but you will definitely have to do that to show that you understand the link between the main literature and your piece of research. And here's a look at how I organized my discussion. So my first question was related to relationship quality, which is a model that I studied. And in that model, there was 5 elements that were mentioned across the interviews. So I made a chapter of relationship quality and then talked about trust. Every time it was mentioned in an interview, I put it in that subchapter. Every time commitment was mentioned in an interview, I wrote about how my findings matched what the literature said about commitment, etc. Then the second one was, what are the perceived benefits and perceived challenges of social media as a relationship marketing tool? So I had my first subchapter where I talked about all the benefits that the marketing managers talked about, and then one with all the challenges and how this was similar or dissimilar to the literature review. And then my final question was about how some football clubs fail to talk with their fans one-to-one. And I asked the managers, why do you guys do that? So what they told me, I wrote it there, and I spoke about the implication that this has for the industry. And I would recommend that you add tables to put a lot of your information as clear as possible. So I was referencing each case as A, B, C, D. So I made sure to make it really clear what the differences were between them. And I just put all of this in the table. It was really easy. So yeah. And these are some more examples of what I wrote in my discussion. So here I say, when prompted with questions relating to the understanding of what makes a high quality relationship with fans, interviewed practitioners fail to directly recognize any construct in the framework, which supports the claim that there is little knowledge and research regarding RQ concepts, which is something that I had talked about in my literature review. So I made that link. All my practitioners failed to mention this, which is exactly what Kim and Trail were talking about. Then here, something happened and it was in line with the literature. Responses highlight that practitioners generally misunderstand what makes a good relationship versus the outcomes of said relationship. So there was, in the literature, I found that there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of confusion about what is a good relationship what is a good relationship quality and what do you get from a good relationship quality? And that was highlighted in my interviews and my research. Here again, I talked about what case C said and linked it to what Gibson and Cullen and Hakkinen and Sudan-Sari said as well. So I made those links where I had to. I made sure to make as many links as possible, and this is really, really important. Again, these are some more examples as well. Some practitioners have supported this statement. Two approaches that are widely enabled by social media, etc. Just make sure that you keep making those links. And yeah, I'll just leave that so you guys can have a little look at it. But basically everything that's highlighted is an example of how I tied in my findings, what my practitioners said with the literature and what academics were saying. And then you get to the conclusion, which is, that's like the final little bit of your dissertation. 300 to 500 words approximately. Of course, this is done at the end. Make sure you're clearly stating the key theories, debates, and arguments, and making sure that your conclusion shows a connection very clearly between the findings and the literature again. It's basically a summary of what you have talked about before. Clearly answer your research questions again to finish really strongly and to make sure that the reader has it very clear by the time they finish reading your dissertation of what you have found, how you have answered the questions. This is not the time to talk about any new theories or any new ideas or arguments. Neither is your discussion. You should not be talking about new papers, new research, new models in your discussion. That's not what that is for. That's what the literature review is for. And yeah, the conclusion is the time to show why your research has been valuable, what implications it might have. So you might want to make some recommendations and talk about some limitations. So, you know, I found out this thing. Maybe this is something that other people should look at in the future. You know, seeing if your work is likely to spark a new area of research. Should future researchers investigate X issue further? Have you uncovered something amazing? You really need to show that you have completely understood the area and have completely understood how your research affects this area. And I would say to make sure that your last sentence or your last few sentences are really, really impactful to leave the reader with a good kind of last impression of you. And it's kind of like a mic drop. You know, you've been talking for 10,000 words. You deserve a mic drop fully. So make sure that you do it. And like it says down here, I included my limitations and recommendations in my conclusion instead of my methodology. That's just something that I personally chose to do, but definitely have a discussion with your supervisor about that. And yeah, these are the first two paragraphs are some recommendations that I made. So I divided my conclusion into two. The first one, limitations and recommendations, and then my actual conclusion. So in here, I talked about a main limitation is the low number of cases that I analyzed due to time constraints. I could only speak to 4 people. I can only manage to find 4 people. So that was a limitation. Also, I spoke with people that worked in football clubs that are in different leagues. And this has a lot of implications because different leagues obviously have different budgets. And a Premier League club will have millions and millions and millions of social media followers, whereas a League 2 club will probably have 3,000, 4,000. So obviously that made really clear differences between what people were saying. And then I talked about another study could look at this other thing that I wasn't able to look at because I just didn't have time. And then just give a conclusion. Again, I stated a lot of things that I had said before. If you feel like you're repeating yourself, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that you're making it really clear for the reader. And this was my last few sentences. So this was actually like the last 4 lines of my dissertation. Technologies and trends are continuously evolving, and as the world becomes increasingly connected through the internet, it is fair to conclude sport organizations will never stop learning and adapting to social media as a relationship marketing tool. Thus, it is expected for many more studies of this nature to be conducted in order to keep up with the best contemporary practices. And that's how I wrapped it up. Finally, okay? Last bit. Our last few bits. You have your reference list. Use the appropriate referencing style. At Kent, mostly we use APA, but if your particular course uses Harvard, or if any of you guys are PG, postgraduate students, you might use a different referencing style, might be required different referencing styles, so you can be mindful of that. I'm a big fan of Cite This For Me, which is a website where you can put the name of an article and it will give you all the references, the whole reference list. I would highly recommend that you use the DOI of research papers. So the DOI is like a very unique link that each of them has. And sometimes when you paste the normal link to an article, it won't fill out all the spaces for you and you'll have to go back manually and do it. But if you use the DOI, 99% of the times it will fill out the entire thing for you, and every research article has this. So definitely make use of that. And make sure that you leave enough time to do your references, okay? I had about 8 pages of references.
There's a question in the chat asking if there's any need for references in the conclusion.
I added some to emphasize certain points and certain key theories that were really relevant throughout my dissertation. It's a good idea if you're going to be talking about something that a different person has said and it's not your original idea. to make sure that you highlight this, that someone else has said it. It shows that you have academic integrity and that you are tackling your assignments ethically and fairly. So I would say if you say something that a different author has said, or if it's a theory or a model, make sure that you reference it in the conclusion. But yeah, like I was saying, I had about 8 pages of references, so I had about 80 to 90 sources for my dissertation, which is a lot. But yeah, make sure that you keep them all in a document, similar to a dump document, so that then you can really easily paste it on Cite This For Me and then paste it back and, you know, go back and forth and get it done all at once. But I remember when I was doing my references, I left it all for the last minute, or like for the last day. And because I had so many, it took me about like 3.5 hours just to do my reference list. So don't underestimate the amount of time that you will need to put all your references in a clearly structured way and following all the guidance and everything. Next, I wanted to talk to you guys about some other really useful resources that you can access if you are still having doubts about your dissertation. So the first one is assignment survival kit called Ask. It's something that the university offers, and it's something that not a lot of people know about. But you can go on the university website and say when your assignment is due, what type of assignment it is, and when you're starting it. And it will give you a plan week by week of where you should be in order to meet your deadline effectively. So definitely use that, not only for your dissertation, but also if you are writing a report or an essay or whatever it is, make sure that you make use of it. Also, you can use the buddy scheme if you want to get paired up with another person that's also doing a dissertation in your same area and you want some mutual support. It's a great way to also ask for a second opinion as well. You can also use SLAS, which is a student learning advisory service offered by the university. They do some really good workshops. They have dissertation writing workshops every few months. So make sure that you check out their website on the university. The webpage on the university website, and keep an eye out for their events. Also, if you're doing a quantitative research, they are doing a lot of bite-sized maths and data analysis and Excel and all that kind of stuff, little workshops. So if you're looking at more information on how to analyze data, they will have specific workshops for that as well. You can also use the Advice Center at Kent Union. We have an amazing independent and confidential advice service that can help you with academic stuff, of course, if you need to make concessions or if you need to ask for extensions or whatever it is. If you need an ILP, they can guide you through it as well. But they can also help you with a lot of other things. They can help you with housing, if you're struggling financially, if you are struggling with any immigration issues or you need some help regarding your visa or whatever it is, make sure that you speak to the Advice Center as well. There's also bite-sized workshops in the library. I'm not sure about Templeman, but I'm sure that there is some in Medway. So I don't know if someone from Medway is in the call, but they always do little workshops in the library. I would recommend using Library Search, which is a search engine on the university webpage where you have all the resources that we have as Kent students available to us. Ask your librarians also, like they're there waiting for students to come ask them for recommendations, where to find certain things, where can I find this type of article, and they'll be more than happy to help you out as well. You can also use the academic peer mentoring scheme, so you can talk to your division and ask if they offer this scheme, and again you get paired up with someone that's in a year above you or a few years above you, and they can tell you about their experience and help you out in a more personal level as well. I would recommend that you ask your friends as well. I asked so many of my friends that none of them had done sports or business to just have a look at my dissertation, see if it read well, if they understood what I was saying, where I was coming from. And it was really useful for me to kind of, you know, temperature check where I was going with it. And also you can ask me as well. I'm more than happy to help if you guys ever need to. And I'll be happy to proofread as well. It's not a problem for me at all. And these are some final takeaways that I really want you guys to remember from today. And that is to make best use of your relationships with your lecturers, with your academics, to make sure that you're getting the most out of them in a respectful way, but also to make sure that you're going in the right track and that you're actually making the most out of it. Second, be critical and unique. Remember the gap. Remember to show off your style. Remember to show off your own perspective, your own academic opinion, and your own academic take on certain things. The most important to me is the findings don't make a great dissertation. That's not what makes a great dissertation. You don't have to find out something groundbreaking for your dissertation to be amazing. You need to show that you understand how research is carried out, that you understand the process that you need to follow. Fourth one is leave enough time to have a look at it with fresh eyes, to be able to reorganize paragraphs, to restructure it if you need to make sure that it looks pretty. One of my favorite things about my dissertation is that it looked pretty, you know, regardless of what it had inside of it. And finally, enjoy it and be proud of your dissertation regardless of the outcome. I dedicated my dissertation to my family even before I knew I got a 95, just because I was so proud of it, because it took so much effort and because I knew all that went into it. So yeah, just enjoy it. It's your last year potentially, if you're not a first year master's, but you know, it's time to show off everything and all the skills that you have gained during your time at Kent. So yeah, just really enjoy it, really. That's it. Also, these are some useful links as well if you want to look at some of the stuff that I said more in detail. The first one is the Royal Literary Fund. The second one is University of New England, I think. This one is Oxbridge Essays, and this is the University of Kent /AI/ask, and that's where you find the assignment survival kit that shows you how to follow a plan for to reach your deadlines. But yeah, thank you so much, guys. Is there any questions about the second half of it?
Was it your undergrad dissertation?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, if there isn't, thank you so much for coming, guys. And remember, my email's always open, my Teams chat is always open, my office is always open, so just feel free to come chat to me if you ever need anything at all.